Hello and welcome. A patient who was part of COVID-19 vaccine trials, phase 3, triggered a global shutdown after she experienced neurological symptoms with a rare but serious spinal disorder, reports have said. Now, this obviously seems like a setback for the vaccine program for COVID-19, but we yet don't know the details. And of course, we're trying to find out what this means in the larger context of the race for the vaccine, which is obviously gathering steam. The larger question also is, what does this tell us about vaccine trials, and should we understand them a little better to know the context in which this particular shutdown may have happened? And remember, there are many trials going on at the same time in different phases. As you know, there are 3 phases of vaccine trials after which they could potentially come into the market. To discuss this, I'm now joined by Dr. N.Kumarasamy, Chief and Director of Infectious Diseases Medical Centre at the Voluntary Health Services or VHS Hospital in Chennai. He's also the Director and Site Leader for the Chennai Antiviral Research Site of the US National Institutes of Health. Dr. Kumarasamy, thank you very much for joining us. So give us a background first. I mean, you know, this sudden shutdown of the vaccine trials has obviously caused a lot of fear. I think the fear is not just that we may not get the vaccine in time, but the fear that a vaccine can cause an adverse reaction which can obviously harm people.
Right. Thank you for inviting me, to this very important program at the need of the hour. As we all know that, everyone on the race to find, cure for COVID or to prevent a perfect vaccine for COVID. So more than 100 different vaccines are in the pipeline. Either they are in the preclinical or in the phase 1, phase 2, and few of them already in, phase 3, clinical trials. At least 3 good candidates have been entered into that based on the previous phase 2 results. Now, before we talk about these adverse events, how these vaccine development happens is, first there is a phase on preclinical where it all happens in the lab, where trying to identify the candidate, and also entire research happens, with the viral particles or with the attenuated particle, how you can elicit immune response to particularly this virus. Once a candidate is developed preclinically, then it's been tested, of course, then it goes to a lot of toxicology tests in animals and, under the lower species. And before it is tested, small number of people in phase 1 trying to understand whether it is tolerable and it is being, safer. But usually these phase 1 trials are done in very smaller number of people, and based on that, then phase 2 trials happen, which will have anything from 100 to 200 people, where it's not mainly to prove the efficacy of a vaccine, but it's mostly into these, again, safety, tolerability, in a short time. Those safety studies don't go for a longer time. It can happen anything from, 6 weeks to 6 months. But now it's a pandemic situation and things are all happening so quickly, and even the results are being extrapolated. We're not waiting for the real endpoint happening. And based on all those, this historical evidence happening in the last 6 months, now these couple of candidate vaccines, which have been moved out of the phase 2, where the results have shown they have been safer and stimulating immunogenicity. So that means it is stimulating immune response to fight against this virus. So that means if these products are given to someone as an injectable, those individuals who have been, vaccinated with these vaccines developed a substance called antibodies to fight against this COVID virus if they have been exposed to. So following this principle, now they have developed this large phase 3 trial. Phase 3 clinical trials are developed not only just study the safety and tolerability and immunogenicity, which has already been done in phase 2, but more into efficacy. So here it's all done, in a group of people where they vaccinate, and always is studied against a placebo, where a group where they won't receive a vaccine, but they still receive something as an injection, which will look similar like a vaccine, but that is not a vaccine. It can be a normal saline, or it could be. It is not a drug. So this is what usually the phase 3 trials does that. And again, the phase 3 trial, the primary endpoint is always efficacy. but there will be a lot of other secondary endpoints which are also being studied as part of the phase 2 trial on the safety, tolerability, and any type of vaccine-related reactions. So when we do these vaccine trials, especially from my background, I've been involved as a principal investigator in doing TB vaccine studies and TB vaccine development, and as well as in HPV vaccine, human papillomavirus vaccines. So when we do all these clinical trials, there are individuals who develop certain adverse events. And again, when we do these vaccine trials, these are injections. When you give these injections to someone, people will complain of pain. Of course, everybody gets a pain when something is pricked. That itself isn't captured as an adverse event. And there could be some itching and reaction at the vaccinated site. Sometimes that area can become reddened and swollen. It's also been captured, as an adverse event. And some individuals developed fever. So when someone develops an immune response, when the body start stimulating immune response, start developing antibodies, they can develop a fever. Some people develop a mild dizziness following these immune response, and some of them develop flu-like symptom. They can have mild fever, like running nose. Like this is something because they are injecting something, and your body is reacting to that, and as a result, you develop these flu-like symptom to combat all those reactions. These are all captured as adverse events.
Again, in but the one that we are currently talking about that was something beyond these symptoms, right? Which are known to be prevalent when.
Let me complete. So these are the adverse events all been captured as part of any clinical trials, particularly in vaccines. So other than this, these are all vaccine-related, reaction. Other than this, anything happens to this individual also been captured. For example, someone who falls down, they have been vaccinated. The next 2 weeks, they fell down, they had a fracture, admitted in the hospital. That's also been captured as an adverse event. Or someone who developed a chest pain and a heart attack, been captured. Someone developed a severe diarrhea, they are hospitalized. Or someone developed some sort of a neurological problem, as discussed in this particular case, in this particular phase 3 vaccine. All are being captured as events. Again, in this grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. Usually in any clinical trials, either the drug trial or vaccine trial, grade 1 and grade 2 usually resolve on its own. When you stop that or you treat the symptomatic things, it resolves. But grade 3 and grade 4, they are really severely symptomatic, or some of their lab abnormality happen. When you give these vaccines, we always do variety of biochemical tests, starting from liver function tests, kidney function tests, electrolytes, hemoglobin, and various other safety tests we do. If it gets altered beyond certain level, also we call grade 3 and grade 4, then we stop that particular interventions we are doing on these individuals. So these are all being graded. And once these are all graded, researchers, what they do is when these adverse events happen, they will always do what is called causality, where it is related to this vaccine or something. Anybody can develop a heart attack, not necessarily because of this vaccine. So they try to link this. So when it is very severe, always still all these real causes are found, then we attribute it could be related to vaccine. Now, particularly, in vaccine trials, in phase 3, we recruit individuals who are all normal, healthy volunteers. They have no disease. They don't have any problem, perfectly fine. So it's important, strict inclusion criteria. So before we vaccinate them. Now, if they develop something, the first thing always comes to our mind is related to the vaccines. So before, we choose out whether it is due to vaccine or, some other cause. So I think here, this particular vaccine phase 3 trial for COVID by the AstraZeneca, in collaboration with Oxford, which is again, a little shocking on hearing this news that one individual developed a neurological manifestation, which is a cause of serious concern, and that too producing transverse myelitis. There are reports coming up. There are certain types of vaccines can produce this. Now, I do not know whether it is related to this particular vaccine or that individual has got any other disorder, which again is a work in progress by the investigators and by the Data Safety Monitoring Board. I think till that time, the investigators and as well as the sponsors decided that they should halt this trial, trying to find out whether it is really related to the vaccine or it is totally unrelated to move forward. It's a huge setback. But on the other hand, this happens, in many clinical trials and as well as in vaccine studies. I think we need to wait for more evidence on this. Also, as you rightly said, now it has been released to the public that discussed these issues. So there's a serious concern now among the volunteers to participate in future vaccine studies. Will the questions will come? Will this going to be safe and do that? I think this now, first thing is now these investigators and the data safety monitoring board of this particular study, they have to clearly come up with an answer, which I'm sure they will do that. They're doing now, that whether it is really due to vaccine or that particular individual has got any other issue which caused this condition.
Right. But you said that, you said that in the past there has been a link between some vaccines and spinal disorders, right? And that's why there was maybe more concern in this particular case.
Yeah, not necessarily spinal or neurological. Some of those, there are reports that some of the vaccines can produce certain type of neurological disorders. It produces what is called
so that is so there is some pattern here, which is why would otherwise a trial be brought to a halt if there was a normal adverse reaction? I'm assuming not.
I think now in the safety of the future study participants who are going to enter, I think the investigators did the right thing to halt this trial, trying to identify the reason before they move forward. But again, at this time, we do not know whether it is just an incidental finding or is due to vaccine. I think we need to wait for more information from the study team.
Right. And in other trials that go on, is this, what is the point at which a trial is brought to a halt? Obviously, because it's COVID, we all know about it, but I'm sure there are many other trials going on where there could be similar responses. And is that common then?
So as I said earlier, during any trials, any clinical trial, either a drug trial or a vaccine trial, there are various adverse events happens like pain, itching, and grade 1, 2.
No, I meant something like this, something of this nature, neurological.
Yeah. So since it is a serious concern, because producing the neurological system, so I think till we try to understand whether it is definitely not related to vaccines, I think the ideal thing is to halt this trial, trying to identify all the possible reason, before it's been, restarted. Now, if it is due to the vaccine, which I do not know.
Right.
Then
so is this adequate precaution? If you look at other trials, wherever they happen, is it adequate precaution that's being taken by halting trials? Is it more than adequate precaution, or what's the nature of response from your understanding?
I think it was really, when I saw the news, it was really, really shocking because we all want a vaccine. After seeing the phase 2 results of this, we thought this will make it as one of the front runner as compared to a lot of other vaccine developments in progress. So, but on the other hand, when you see such an event, so I think now I think what the investigators and the sponsors did the right thing to trying to find out. At least it is not the real cause of the vaccine to move forward, because that itself is very important, one as a safety concern, and also the confidence of future volunteers. So to say that, it is not due to the vaccine, I think, that type of answer should come from these investigators and from the study team.
Right, and that's an important point. Obviously, future volunteers would be wary. So you talked about the placebo being injected, and so could this be a placebo? So I'm assuming somehow from the train of thought that this is not unlikely to be a placebo.
Yeah, it's quite possible because it is a randomized, blinded clinical trial. So the investigators do not know whether the particular participant received a placebo or real the intervention vaccine product. I think now they halted. Now they would have unblinded this because here come the data safety monitoring board. They would have been invited, to review this data, and they work very closely with the statistical and the analytical team and do the unblinding, particularly of this participant. And if it is a placebo, they'll come up and say that, okay, there is no cause of concern. But if it is due to a vaccine, then they will try to look into the causality to this. I think currently, it's all happened in the last 24 to 36 hours. I think, I assume whatever I said is currently been happening. I think they will not be able to open completely this blinded thing to everybody, so it will get confounded. So there is a small group of DSMB, they'll meet and do that, and they will advise a study team to continue or interrupt. I think that's going to be the answer probably in the next 48 hours or so will happen.
Right. Last question, Dr. Kumarasamy. So who is, it's not clear to me from the outside, so who calls a halt to trials in situations like this? Is it the people who are conducting the trials? Is there someone regulating it? And obviously different countries are involved here. How does that work? I mean, what's the oversight?
Yeah. So usually when we do when we do a clinical trial, the investigators, they are part of an institution. So it goes through their own institutional ethical committee. They review the study and use all the approval before they do the study. And once an approval happens, only they can initiate the study. Before that, it also goes through other country regulation. For example, in India, it also goes through the drug control of India. Before it goes to the ethics committees, get to the proper approval, whether this particular product can be tested in India, then goes to this ethics committee. So the minute when an adverse event happens, the investigators of that particular institution, within 24 hours, they report to the own ethics committee, as well as to the drug controller of India, DCGI here in India, and as well as to the sponsors. And once it is being informed about this particular incident that happened, then the ethics committee immediately takes a decision, and as well as the sponsors and as well as the regulators here, DCGI, all together take a decision that whether the study should be immediately halted. The first thing happens is usually when you see an unwanted thing, they say, okay, don't do no new enrollment. Whatever participant you already enrolled, continue the same way like in the similar protocol, but don't do no new enrollment. That's currently happened here. I won't use the word halted the trial. The trial is ongoing. They have already vaccinated a very large number of people in different parts of the world, and they are all continuing. They are already vaccinated. They are continuing the study procedures where there are blood draws happening over a period of time and for safety and as well as for the efficacy of this. That's continuing. But what they have halted is they are not doing a new enrollment, new screening and enrollment. Right. So that's something had happened. This is why I call it as temporarily pause of this trial. This happens in many studies. I think now how quickly, since it is now in a pandemic situation, everyone on the running race for the vaccine, I think how quickly all those they will solve it before they move forward with this product.
Right, Dr. Kumarasamy, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you also for your insights. And I'm sure we'll get back to you as we continue to look for a vaccine for COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Yeah, one other thing before we sign off is I think this is very important. For the I want to use the word halting, stopping the trial, trying to identify what is the real cause. Because it's also important to build confidence among the future volunteers, not only for this vaccine studies. There are several vaccine trials in the pipeline. I think the minute when these investigators and the sponsors give the real answer, stating that what could be the possible cause, will also give a lot of confidence for the future volunteers to participate. And at this time, we also need healthy volunteers to participate in these clinical trials to move forward science to do this. I think to win the confidence of these volunteers, I think we need good answers, good review by the Data Safety Monitoring Board, investigators, and by the sponsors, then to the public. Thank you.
Right, Dr. Kumarasamy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.